The cultural worship of multitasking is a highly sophisticated, economically devastating illusion designed to run our cognitive machinery at maximum capacity while quietly decimating our actual productivity. For generations, the modern professional arena has celebrated the capacity to juggle multiple complex objectives simultaneously as a badge of honor, treating the fast-paced shifting between screens, notifications, and meetings as the ultimate metric of high-efficiency performance. In his surgical and highly practical behavioral text, The Myth of Multitasking, corporate consultant Dave Crenshaw completely demolishes this deeply entrenched workplace dogma, presenting a radical neurological and operational thesis. The human brain is physically, structurally incapable of processing more than one single high-leverage cognitive task at any given microsecond. Crenshaw exposes the staggering hidden costs of divided attention, revealing that what regular people pride themselves on as efficient multitasking is actually a destructive behavioral loop he labels switch tasking. By meticulously breaking down the geometry of task disruption, the compounding loss of temporal capital, and the framework of singular focus, the book serves as a precise structural blueprint to help us reclaim our fractured attention, protect our collaborative relationships, and automate a state of deep, high-value creative flow. To understand why our brains feel so profoundly exhausted, yet incredibly unproductive at the end of a chaotic workday, we must first isolate the precise mechanical friction Crenshaw addresses, the heavy toll of continuous switch tasking. True multitasking is biologically possible only when one of the operations is a completely automated, low cognitive background habit that relies on separate neurological pathways, such as walking on a treadmill while listening to an educational audiobook, or chewing gum while sorting physical files. The catastrophe occurs when we attempt to execute what Crenshaw defines as switch tasking, the rapid, erratic alternating of attention between two or more active, complex tasks that require conscious intellectual processing. Think of the casual habit of typing a detailed narrative script while occasionally pausing to read an incoming text message, or attempting to review a financial spreadsheet while actively listening to a team collaborator speak on a video call. When you switch your focus from your primary project to a secondary distraction and then immediately bounce back to your original work, your mind doesn't execute a seamless, instantaneous transition. Instead, your prefrontal cortex is forced to perform an incredibly expensive, multi-stage neurological reboot. It must completely deactivate the active rules, contexts, and memory files of Task A, locate and upload the parameters of Task B, and then reverse the entire complex protocol when you return to your starting position. Behavioral data shows that this frantic task switching creates a state of intense cognitive friction that causes tasks to take up to double the time to complete, while multiplying your statistical error rate by several 100%, proving that trying to save time by doing everything at once is a form of functional self-sabotage. This systemic efficiency loss is further contaminated by an invisible, compounding penalty known as cognitive residue. When your attention shifts away from a deep creative block or an unsolved coding hurdle to handle a sudden notification, your brain cannot instantly clean the slate. A significant portion of your finite intellect remains left behind, stuck in a state of subconscious processing, actively ruminating on the unresolved parameters of the previous task. By the time you bounce through 4 or 5 different projects in a single hour, your working memory resembles a cluttered desktop overflowing with fragmented files, leaving you with an incredibly narrow, sluggish beam of remaining focus to apply to your primary objective. This background noise creates an ambient state of chronic stress, hypervigilance, and unexamined anxiety, forcing your body to secrete continuous floods of cortisol and adrenaline to maintain alertness. You find yourself trapped in a state of frantic, shallow busyness, spinning your wheels across a dozen uncompleted front lines, while completely losing the capacity for the deep, original thinking required to master a complex craft or finish a novel-length manuscript. Crenshaw forces us to recognize that this operational rot doesn't merely damage individual output. It inflicts an equally devastating toll on our human networks through the phenomenon of relational switch tasking. When you are engaged in a conversation with a spouse, a child, or a remote collaborator, and you occasionally glance down to check an incoming notification or quietly reply to an email under the table, your brain is actively switch tasking on their humanity. The human brain is an exquisitely sensitive pattern recognition machine that can instantly read the microscopic drops in eye contact, the shifts in posture, and the minute delays in vocal response that signal a divided mind. By refusing to offer your singular, uncompromised presence to the person standing across from you, you send a clear, unmistakable signal that their time, their ideas, and their presence are fundamentally secondary to whatever random digital noise happens to populate your screen. This behavior completely erodes institutional trust, fractures psychological safety, and breeds deep undercurrents of resentment that quietly dismantle team dynamics and personal relationships far faster than any overt professional disagreement ever could. To systematically insulate our workflows against these hidden deficits and reclaim our sovereign cognitive capital, Crenshaw introduces the practical discipline of the time budget, a framework anchored in the concept of dedicated focus blocks. You must completely reject the chaotic status quo of permanent availability, consciously choosing to structure your schedule into ironclad, singular focus compartments where secondary inputs are ruthlessly locked out of existence. If you are entering a block dedicated to writing a critical chapter or fixing a complex software system, you must implement automated pre-commitments to protect your boundary long before the temptation to drift surfaces. Turn off the background notification lights, close the extra communication tabs, and place your phone in an entirely separate room. By forcing your environment to conform to a single-task architecture, you preserve your finite willpower, eliminate the temptation of the immediate dopamine loop, and allow your brain to settle into a state of deep, high-leverage flow. You discover that an hour of singular, uninterrupted execution produces vastly superior structural quality and narrative density than 4 hours of fragmented, hyper-reactive labor, enabling you to outproduce your distracted peers while working a fraction of the time. This structured isolation must be reinforced by a highly methodical approach to managing the inevitable external interruptions that define a modern business environment, an operational habit Crenshaw calls building an interruption shield. When a collaborator walks into your office or drops an urgent message into your chat, your automatic behavioral script should never be to instantly drop your current work to handle their request. Instead, you must establish a clear, predictable communication protocol that acknowledges their need while strictly protecting your current cognitive block. Offer a specific, upcoming time slot to address their challenge, saying, "I am completely dedicated to finishing this project right now, but I have an open slot at exactly 2 o'clock today where I can give your problem my absolute, undivided attention." By scheduling the interruption rather than reacting to it, you maintain your response flexibility, down-regulate the ambient panic of the workplace, and ensure that when you finally do address their challenge, you are offering them a fresh, high-value prefrontal cortex rather than a scattered, exhausted mind. Ultimately, the myth of multitasking is an urgent, deeply empowering cognitive manifesto that demands a total revolution in how we value our mental energy and structure our daily schedules. It forcefully strips away the self-defeating illusions of modern hustle culture, reminding us that true brilliance is never achieved by dipping our toes into a dozen different pools simultaneously, but by diving deep into the one ocean that matters to our current destiny. The journey to an extraordinary life of creative autonomy, professional legacy, and profound peace of mind does not require an external miracle or a higher baseline of raw IQ. It simply requires you to look at your daily micro-choices with absolute, unflinching honesty, to close the door on the background noise of a hyper-connected world, and to execute each task with absolute, singular devotion by choosing focused blocks over erratic switch tasking, structured pre-commitments over last-minute willpower battles, and radical presence over digital isolation. You break the chains of behavioral fragmentation forever. The next time you find yourself tempted to open another browser tab, check another notification, or answer another non-urgent alert in the middle of your core labor, pause. Honor your biology, tethers your focus to the single objective before you, and claim the magnificent efficiency you are truly born to command.